Hi, my name is Brandon, and sometimes people call me a magician, and sometimes I like to magish. Some people think magic is all lies and deception and cheap tricks, but I've been studying the art for more than 25 years, and I've come to believe that magic has a lot to teach us about the ways of the world, and about the ways we've come to understand the ways of the world. See, magic ignites imagination. It achieves the impossible, but perhaps most importantly, magic reminds us that everything we think we know might, maybe, possibly be wrong. Perhaps I can show you what I mean. I brought with me here 3 playing cards for people with big hands. They also help make sure the people in the back can see what's going on. Now, for this little game, we'll use this bright red, easy to follow, Queen of Hearts, and these 2 distraction cards, which are there to, oh, that's right, they're there to distract you. See, they're already working. Now, the name of the game is to follow the lady, so keep your eyes on that bright red, easy to follow Queen of Hearts. Hey, diddle diddle, the queen is in the middle. Now, how many of you would be willing to bet that you know exactly where that Queen of Hearts is? Of course, that's not really fair, right? You got to let me mix up the cards. That's what makes it fun. That's a little better, yes? Would you be willing to guess? This one? Of course, it's not really fair, right? I move slowly on purpose because I want you to feel confident that you've got things figured out. And if I were a con artist, which I'm not anymore, I would take your money and run. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Now, perhaps there's too much going on. So why don't we do this? We'll eliminate some of the distraction. Now, keep your eyes on that bright red, easy to follow Queen of Hearts. I move fairly and gently, so you know you can't be wrong. You can be confident, certain. You've watched it all along. You're comforted by the pace. There's no race. It's smooth and slow. But we're always missing something. Even when we think we know. Thank you so much. Thank you. I love sharing magic with people, not just because it's a lot of fun for most of us, but because it reminds us that we're always missing something. Even when we're paying really close attention, we're always missing something. This is a powerful idea, and I think it just might be the key to some of our greatest personal, professional, and dare I say, global challenges. Now, I know that's a bold claim, because at first, it doesn't seem like it could be that powerful. After all, it's not new. But while most people agree that we're always missing something, we also forget this idea all the time. And it's when we forget this idea, when we feel like we've got things figured out, that we create all sorts of trouble for ourselves. See, we can be totally in the dark and still feel confident that we've got things figured out. I've come to call this phenomenon the illusion of knowing, and it's the reason that magic works. And while the illusion of knowing is great for magic, it gets us into trouble in all sorts of ways. And it has the ability to transform the kindest, warmest people into ignorant, arrogant monsters. See, I was performing the same card trick I shared with you for a lovely couple of couples at a private party I'd been hired to entertain at. And we're getting to the finale of the trick when this obnoxious, arrogant know-it-all, forgive my language, pops his head into the group, points at the card over there and says, "The card's over there." Dude. He's not trying to be mean, of course. He just wants to prove to everybody that he knows what's up. And in doing so, he ruins the trick. Politely, the guests go on their way. Unfortunately, he does not. As I continue to roam around the party, entertaining for other guests, this guy finds a way to pop his head in and make a guess about how I'm doing all the tricks. And of course, the worst part is, he's wrong about all of it. But that doesn't matter. All that matters is that he feels like he knows. He's under the illusion of knowing. And of course, the other guests are super annoyed by this, but he's so oblivious, he has no idea. And as much as I want to say to him, "Dude, buzz off, let people enjoy the show," I hold back because I'm a professional, after all. As some of you may know, even professionals have breaking points. A little later on in the evening, I'm attempting a mind reading demonstration, and everything's really tense because I'm trying to read someone's mind. And my eyes are closed so I don't see him coming. But out of the blue, this voice breaks the tension. Is he trying to be psychic? And I think, enough is enough. Dude, leave us alone! And I snap at him. And as my eyes come into focus, I realize I'm not looking at the obnoxious, arrogant know-it-all. No, that dude is nowhere to be found. Instead, I'm looking at a man I've never met. A man who was in the bathroom when our little show began. A man who now looks pretty hurt and offended. When he had asked if I was trying to be psychic, he was just trying to get caught up. And I snapped at his curiosity. I had been confident, I had been certain that I was dealing with an obnoxious, arrogant know-it-all, and I ended up looking like one myself. The illusion of knowing gets us into trouble in all sorts of ways, but it transforms the kindest, warmest people into ignorant, arrogant monsters. And now it's easy to see somebody else's mistake and think, well, I wouldn't have done that. But of course, that's the nature of mistakes. We don't recognize when we're making them. I got permission from the brilliant author and journalist Catherine Schultz to try a demonstration, maybe to prove the point. So maybe I'll invite you to participate. Get a little reflective right now. And think about, what does it feel like to be right? What does it feel like to know something? Maybe a word or two? What does it feel like to be right? It feels good. Yeah, confident, ego massaging. We love the feeling of being right. Okay, let me ask you this one. What does it feel like to be wrong? Heartbreaking, humiliating, bad. I agree. Thanks for sharing, by the way. And while I agree with these sentiments, I think we're actually answering the wrong question. See, I think these ideas describe what it feels like to find out that we're wrong. Until we find out that we're wrong, the feeling of being wrong and the feeling of being right feel the same. This is why we're all susceptible to the illusion of knowing. We can be totally in the dark and still feel confident that we've got things figured out. We don't even need actual knowledge to feel like we know. And it turns out that our need to feel like we know is built right into our biology. Neuroscientists have discovered a part of our frontal cortex that is dedicated to the feeling of knowing. And if we stimulate this area in any one of our brains, we would immediately begin to claim that we could, recite the complete works of William Shakespeare without ever having read a volume. The illusion of knowing gets us into all sorts of trouble in all sorts of ways. Psychologists have identified we have something called a certainty bias. Right? This is what makes us make quick assumptions and jump to conclusions. We love the feeling of knowing, so we'd much rather take a chance and be wrong than feel unsure. And while this adaptation makes sense, considering our ancestors who needed every ounce of energy to hunt and forage and couldn't waste on feeling uncertain, we have to admit that nowadays our bias for certainty gets us into as much trouble as it helps us. And it's this quality that we all have in common. It's this quality that makes all of us ignorant, arrogant monsters at different points in our lives. No offense. But it's true. And accepting and recognizing this idea has powerful implications for our ability to solve problems, for our own personal development, and perhaps most interestingly for our theme today, this idea helps us build resilience in the face of ignorance and arrogance. In all my years of studying magic and psychology and the illusion of knowing, I've come to believe that the best way to deal with difficult people is to remember that I'm just as difficult. That might seem like a bit of a letdown. But I have to tell you, this idea is leap years ahead of my traditional strategy. You see, for years, when I was faced with a belief that I disagreed with, my default approach was to argue or criticize, or argue and criticize. And the truth is that arguing and criticizing don't lead to progress. Like, when was the last time you changed your mind during an argument? Right, never. Because arguing is not about understanding. Arguing is about defending an already established point of view. When we argue, we dig in. We try to win. It's counterproductive. Think about how much energy we waste trying and trying to make ourselves understood. And then how much more energy we waste when we complain that we're not. We would do better to invest our energy first into trying to understand. Instead of judging or criticizing others for being wrong, we would do well to remember that there's a better than good chance we are wrong somehow too. After all, magic reminds us we're always missing something, even when we think we know. What we're really after with difficult people is dialogue. And dialogue happens when we have a shared sense of trust. And a shared sense of trust comes from our mutual efforts to try and understand one another. So before I leave today, I'd love to share with you 3 ideas that have helped me learn to dialogue with those I find most difficult. The first idea comes to me from a mentor that I had when I was in high school. He's an expert innovator and collaborator. And one day he overheard me complaining about an argument that I'd gotten into. I was getting all worked up and he said to me, "Change your F word." It's not actually his voice, but it's a good mentor voice, I think. Change your F word. Don't say, "How frustrating." That's exhausting. Instead say, "How fascinating." And be amazed that someone could see the world so differently. I've got to tell you, the practice of shifting from frustration to fascination has stretched my minds in ways I couldn't have imagined. Not only has it helped me build relationships with people I totally disagree with, but it's helped me find joy and wonder in even the most challenging of circumstances. How fascinating. It's a powerful spell of possibility. The second idea I'd like to share with you is another sort of magic spell. I say it to myself over and over again. And while I don't know exactly where I learned it, I find it's most effective when I'm in a state of disagreement, when I'm defensive, or when I'm confident. It's important to remember, I might be wrong. Usually it sounds more like this. I might be wrong. However I say it, it's important that I do. And I want you to know that this is different than admitting to mistakes I've already found out that I've made. We expect children to own their mistakes. The more advanced version requires admitting that we might be wrong. It's about taking responsibility for the possibility of error. It's a small thought, but it's enough to poke a hole in my defenses and shift my state into dialogue, and I find myself listening more readily. When I admit that I might be wrong, everybody that I meet instantly becomes a teacher. And this is why I'm convinced that owning and taking responsibility for the possibility of error is the way of the lifelong learner. The last idea I'd like to share with you comes to me from my practice of yoga and meditation and some of the other metaphysical schools of magic. Namely, it's this. People are more than their ideas. People are more than their ideas. We tend to believe that our ideas and our beliefs define and identify us. And so we attach labels to ourselves and to one another. Like a flat earther, tree hugger, bear hugger, vegetarian, meatitarian, vegan, meathead, metalhead, gangster, nerd, gamer, jock, hacker, liar, lawyer, criminal, conspiracy theorist, theoretical physicist, brain scientist, rocket surgeon. I don't know what a rocket surgeon is. Left wing, right wing, communist, capitalist, Muslim, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, non-believer, non-denominational believer, full-blown Justin Belieber. It's ridiculous. We should be careful about the labels we attach to ourselves and others. When we hold people in categories in our minds, when people become their ideas, we can no longer discuss ideas. Our judgments become personal. Our conversations escalate into attacks on the ego, and any chance of dialogue is swallowed up as we reach for our swords. when I can find a way to remember that people are more than their ideas, as tough as it is, somehow, if only remotely, I can see myself on the same team. Because after all, according to this idea, I am more than my ideas as well. Changing my F word, admitting I might be wrong, and remembering that people are more than their ideas. These thoughts have helped me build relationships and learn from as many people as I can meet. As I see it, the first step in the battle against ignorance and arrogance is not logic or reason. It's not arguing or criticizing, but understanding. I really think that's all any of us wants, is to be understood. It's certainly why I'm here. Perhaps it's part of the reason you're here too. And when we feel like we've got things figured out, we close ourselves off to understanding. Not just other people and their perspectives, but understanding the complexity of our problems. We even close off to understanding ourselves. But remembering the illusion of knowing creates space for understanding. And I believe that when we try, like when we really try, we can connect on a level deeper than our differing perspectives. We can build trust, and we can open our minds to possibilities. It's long been known that stories are the glue that hold us together. The greatest pursuits in history are different versions of the quest for our ultimate human story. And different religions and political viewpoints and socioeconomic paradigms have claimed they've got all the answers. But what if our true unifying story is that none of us has the answers, but all of us has something worth considering? What if our human story, the one that unites us against our broader global challenges, is one of a shared sense of curiosity and wonder? It would be a little more than ironic if I didn't admit that all of this might be wrong. But I think it's important to remember the illusion of knowing, not just in others, but in ourselves. We can be totally in the dark and still feel confident that we've got things figured out. If we can learn from the art of magic and learn to love mystery and to appreciate uncertainty and to feel delighted rather than discouraged when we get things wrong, well, maybe then we can begin to embrace our common story of discovery. Thank you.